When you first think of Eve, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Well, her obvious trait is how beautiful and attractive she is. She's designed to exemplify ideal feminine beauty, and she succeeds quite well in that regard. But what about her personality? Since the game's release, many people have critiqued Eve for being a bland or boring main character. However, I never really got that impression of her. I think most people misunderstand Eve, and that's the core of the problem. From the moment we meet her, we get a very interesting and unique personality for a video game protagonist. During the battle at the beach, we see Eve as someone who gets overwhelmed emotionally. Her potlatch fails, and you can see how frantic and desperate she is to escape. It's not until Tachy rescues her that she calms down and gets a better grasp of the situation. And throughout the entire beach sequence, we get these little moments where Eve doubts herself. She panics at the sight of her lost comrades and has to rely on Tachy to get her mind out of the gutter. It's upon Tachy's sacrifice that part of Eve's world shatters. She not only loses the last fellow survivor of the invasion force, but her commander and, more importantly, her older sister figure. As seen in the motion comic, while brief, it does a solid job in building upon their friendship. Eve sees Tachy as this older sister that she can rely on and learn so much from. So it's no wonder Eve is traumatized for the rest of her journey. We see it in how she has to catch her breath every time she re-experiences Tachy's sacrifice in her mind. My favorite personality trait of Eve is her tendency to reflect on herself and the world around her. She's by no means a silent protagonist like Joker from Persona 5 or Byleth from Fire Emblem, but she's someone who also isn't necessarily outspoken and talkative either. She fits this very different character archetyping mold we don't really get to see too often in gaming. At the first camp, we get the first instance of Eve's reflective nature. She stares at the ground and recalls the previous day's events from where the player left off. She's clearly traumatized losing Tachy and all her sisters in arms, so like any soldier would be. Camp seems to be a very important part of Eve's character, and I think it's intentional by the developers. At every camp, she can take a seat to recover and just sit there as long as she pleases. In fact, there are so many moments in the game where Eve is just sitting or standing there staring at the world before her. And for someone like Eve, she needs these opportunities to clear her mind and reflect. It's like meditation to her, and it acts as a coping mechanism as she has to deal with all this trauma and pain. On the Idaho 7 monorail, Eve looks onto the desolate city and takes a moment to stare at her hand. You get this feeling that she just seems so lost and unsure at this point in the story, but she has to put up this mask and stay strong if her mission is to be completed. Moments like this happen when she looks onto open world maps such as the Wasteland and the Great Desert. She's observant and constantly feels the need to take a moment to stop and watch. Just by the way her hands and head move, you can get this idea of Eve's headspace, whether she's in pain or if she's happy or in awe of what she's seeing. Enya is a character that really builds and adds towards Eve. Eve is at awe the moment she meets the singer and is quickly captivated by her vocals and her story. From Enya's lyricless melody to the final version of the song Beyond Fate, it deeply resonates with Eve. Eve's entire purpose in life was determined by fate, but she ultimately is the one who shaped herself to the protagonist that goes far beyond her predetermined fate. She's capable of shaping her own future, and at that point in the story, it's the subconscious undertones that impact Eve, whether Eve realizes it or not. Enya and her song are a reminder to Eve of what truly matters in this world, and what Eve needs to protect, no matter what. Then there's Clyde, our favorite fisherman, who helps Eve have a greater notice towards the little things in life. Without saying much, he immediately grabs Eve's attention just by his actions. He's so laid back and unbothered by the world and the dangers around him that even someone like Eve can't help but be curious. Upon Eve's mastery of fishing, Clyde gives her the ocean-made nanosuit, much to Eve's shock and disappointment. The entire interaction is clearly meant for a good laugh, but there's a little bit more to it. Eve is not only shocked about this, but she's more shocked about how Clyde has a good sense of humor. Clyde even manages to bring out a frustrated Eve, something not many can do at this point in the story. Eve really starts to accept the person that she is and the decisions she has to make from here on out. Eve's inquisitive nature also contributes to her overall reflective personality. She's curious about the current world and the world that came before her existence. And she also just finds herself drawn to the elements of the past, from fishing to her can collection hobby. I think the reason people seem to fail to understand Eve's character is likely the difference in personality types. It generally helps if you happen to share a similar personality with her, and I feel that's the reason I somewhat understand her character, her feelings. Like Eve, I'm not silent, but I'm also not the most talkative person you'll ever meet. I also get lost in thought at any given moment, and I find myself reflecting on the past and present whenever I have the opportunity to. And I get her feeling the need to be strong in order to accomplish her goals, and that's what I love about her, besides her design, of course. She's not perfect. In fact, she's far from perfect. Eve starts off scared, unsure, and traumatized, but immediately understands how she needs to keep those insecurities in check for the greater good. And more importantly, for her own good. Even if it's for just a brief moment. It takes the entire game for her to really manifest as a confident and sure woman that she becomes by the game's ending. I could go on and on about Eve's other traits, like her kindness, but that's something I think most people are likely to observe easily. I don't need to really spell that out for you. While I'm in agreement that the writing could have helped make Eve's personality stand out more, I feel her personality was intentionally subdued. Eve is a lot like Rappy, Shift Up's cover girl for the Goddess of Victory Nike, one of my favorite gacha games. Rappy is someone who's calm and more on the quiet side, but over the course of the story, we get to see her open up to those around her. You can see the moments when Rappy is lost in thought. She never explicitly states it, but she doesn't need to, similar to Eve. If you've managed to make it this far in the video, I hope you have a better insight into Eve as a character. She's far more interesting and unique than most people seem to give her credit for. Her personality is more nuanced compared to many other characters in the action RPG genre, but that hardly makes her personality bland. Eve is exactly how I imagined her to be. She's lost, broken, and unsure when we first meet her, but ultimately rises above those insecurities while still keeping her reflective nature. I never expected Eve to be very expressive. Eve is someone who keeps her feelings to herself. She's just like us, someone new to this world trying to explore it and understand her role. If we get a sequel, I'd love to explore Eve's character deeper as she continues to open up her personality and thoughts to those around her. Eve as a character is one I can't help but gravitate towards.